Welcome to the Visual Content Marketing Show. I'm your host, Krishna Day, and the Visual Content Marketing Show is all about exploring how to integrate visual content into your digital marketing and communications plans, including trends, technologies, and practical tips. In terms of our show today, we're going to be talking about Pinterest and using it for your small business. So our hashtag is Pinterest Savvy Live. And why Pinterest Savvy? Well, that's all because my guest today, who we'll be talking to shortly, is Melissa Taylor, who has authored Pinterest Savvy, and she's now on her second edition. Pinterest is moving so fast that, in fact, although she had her first edition of the book published in the spring, or very, very early, in fact, of 2013, she's had to put her pen back to paper in terms of getting the next edition out. So I'm thrilled that actually she's going to be with us today. A little bit more about her in just a moment. So you're in the right place if you've been using Pinterest or considering to use Pinterest in terms of your small business. But if you're struggling to see, well, how is this going to make a difference to my organization? What is it going to do for my lead generation or sales or referrals? And I'm really not sure I'm getting actually anything out of it. That's what we're going to be covering today. And we're going to specifically also cover tools and tips and basically lots of ideas. And I really want to encourage you to share your questions. You can post them over on our event page, and of course you can post them on Twitter. Because we've got so much to cover, I'll do my best to bring those questions in, but I will try to do a check up on any outstanding questions towards the end of the time. Now, what I'd like to do before we get started is just explain about why, in fact, we're looking at this particular topic today. Well, if you had followed my work in terms of on Google Plus and on my blogs, you'd know about Melissa's book. I've written about this, I've written a review of it, and what I wanted to do was reach out to Melissa because she's got a new edition available. And my big call to action to you today, guys, is get it today, because depending on your time zone, Melissa has made this book freely available for us all. So head on over to Amazon. You'll find it in the Amazon store. Make sure you download it. It's part of the area that I've looked at today in terms of our curriculum, in terms of exploring it. And you might say, well, why on earth should you be talking to Melissa? There's lots of other people out there who are using Pinterest in their organization. And let me tell you why Melissa. Melissa is actually the author of an award-winning educational blog called Imagination Soup. And we'll hear more of her story in a little while. But in fact, she was getting so much success in terms of using Pinterest, in terms of supporting her work with Imagination Soup. She writes books, she contributes in terms of lots of training, she delivers her own training courses, she's got her own masterminds now specifically on Pinterest, in fact. And so what's happened is she thought she'd put pen to paper, as I mentioned before. And that's, in fact, how I came to know Melissa. I've really thrilled that I can consider her to be a friend. I only wish we were in the same country, if not the same town. That would be absolutely fantastic. But I hope you're going to enjoy our conversation today in terms of being here with Melissa. So let's go and meet Melissa now. Melissa, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
and
you.
I've got your lovely, happy face there.
Oh,
and I think that's one of the rooms that you do all your education and work from. And I'm just thrilled that you're able to join us here and help us dispel some of the issues around using Pinterest. So perhaps you can start off and tell people how you really got into using Pinterest in your organization, because you were one of the early adopters.
Yeah, first of all, that was the nicest introduction I've ever heard. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and I love working with you. And I mean, I should say, for those of you who don't know Krishna, she is one of the top experts on social media. She does everything, so you definitely want to check out her blog. She's so great to work with, and I'm so thrilled to be here on her show. So thank you again. I started as Krishna mentioned, I'm a freelance writer by trade, and I have my own educational website and blog. So I started on Pinterest because it really lent itself well to my content. There's a lot of moms on Pinterest, and it really helped promote my own blog. A couple of years ago, I wasn't tracking my analytics very well, and then I one day looked at it, and I was getting 300,000 hits a month, which for me, a couple months before, I was getting like 40,000 hits. So I thought, what is going on? Well, it turns out it was Pinterest. I had grown my Pinterest following to over 1 million, and I mean, it was crazy. I was just getting so much traffic. So one of the reasons I wrote the book Pinterest Savvy was to share that information with other people who kept asking me, what are we doing wrong? What could we do better? And it's great that I have the opportunity on Amazon to offer it for free. So it is free today, and I'm sure Krishna has it in the notes. But if you go, and you can also Google it, and you can get it for free today, which is a pretty cool thing. So that's the Pinterest updates that I just put in the book include some of the new rules about contests, rich pins, that's a new thing, and some tips on monetizing Pinterest. So you definitely want to check that out because it's such a great marketing tool.
Well, Melissa, I'm thrilled that you're able to be with us because you've had the book available for a couple of days, but I have to say, even if you're watching this after the event, it is worthwhile getting the book. It's not very expensive. It's got really practical tips, but let's deep dive into the book in terms of giving the people who are joining us here today or watching the replay or listening to the replay in terms of some practical advice. So perhaps we can start off with actually, if you're a small business, and one of the challenges that I see small businesses have all the time is how do you get everything done? And I know that you and I are both small businesses. I know one of the things I've done in the last couple of years is really try to increase the amount of visual content. It's not an easy thing necessarily to do. And actually, if you don't have great visual content, then that's one of the stumbling blocks in terms of Pinterest. And a big challenge that people will say is, haven't got the time. How do we do everything? How do we keep up with everything? And I know you're active on other platforms. You're very active in blogs. You do other freelance writing. So what would you say to people who are with us today and saying, I don't have the time, and show me what the benefit is of integrating Pinterest? How on earth could we even get to the same, even half the numbers or a quarter of the numbers or a tenth of the numbers that you just talked about, Melissa?
Well, I mean, I did have the benefit of being an early adopter, so it's a lot harder now with more people. But for the time management thing, let's talk about that first. The time management thing, I think you have to look at your priorities of where your customers are living, where they are, and then what's getting you the most traffic. So Pinterest has such a great opportunity for a lot of traffic for inexpensive. We know a lot of people are on Facebook, but it's more expensive now. It's harder to get noticed on Facebook. So when you're talking about, your return on investment per dollars, Pinterest is the place to be. I think also the trend now is that curated content is where people are buying from. They really want curated content, and Pinterest that's exactly all it is curated content. And because the demographic is primarily female, we know that in two partner families, the females are usually the ones making the buying decision. So again, it's such a great place to target your customers for really inexpensive. It's a time investment. Sometimes you invest in people who help you with that, with graphics. But to the time investment, so I had to decide to do less on Twitter and not do Instagram and spend more time on Pinterest because of that. But I also really recommend planning out your week in advance so that if you can get your schedule of what you're going to pin, and I keep it in Evernote. I know some people keep it in Excel, and then I have a plan of what I can pin, so I can go on and spend 5 to 10 minutes a couple times a day, and then I'm done. So that makes it a lot more effective time management. I also follow a lot of people so that I have good content always in my feed that I can quickly find great things to pin and not have to search for them. So it's about deciding where you're going to invest your social media time, because you can't do everything. But it is really worth it. I think the return on investment of your time on Pinterest versus on Twitter and even Facebook is huge. And now we're on Google Plus too. But yeah, I mean, in Pinterest we know that customers are spending a lot of money from their time on Pinterest. So,
you know, one of the things I've noticed over certainly the last 18 months is that Pinterest actually ranks in search results. So if I'm doing searches, very often these days, I actually find Pinterest at the top of a search result or a board on Pinterest.
right.
So as you were saying, we might be on other platforms, but actually it plays really well. In fact, one of the things I'll often do on a post on Google Plus or on any other platform is actually say, here's the pin if you want to share it for later, because I think some of us are using Pinterest as a way of curating content. And as you say, you use Evernote, there's Dig, there's Delicious, there's many other tools. But actually, Pinterest actually has overtaken Storify for me. I like Storify, but in fact, for visual content, I'll often curate it over to Pinterest. And a lot of my content, I'll admit, is actually hidden. I actually hide things in my secret boards for projects I'm working on. So I think we were talking about just before we came into the green room, I had 2 media appearances last week. And as I was doing my research to make sure I was fully on top of my game, I actually shared all that content I was curating over onto secret boards on Pinterest that I could then go back later just to refresh myself before I went live. And one was a radio appearance and one was a TV appearance. But actually I was using it for saving it. So there's lots, as you say, lots of changes that have come on and lots of people using it different ways. But
Yeah.
I have two questions for you. One out of interest in terms of, and I'll bundle these questions together. Firstly, Pinterest is predominantly used on mobile devices. 75% of users globally are using Pinterest on their mobile device, and that's data from Pinterest. So I'm interested about how you use Pinterest, particularly when it comes to your business. And the second thing I want to talk about is back to the value of Pinterest. You talked about sharing content of other people's content, and I know that's something that you and I have talked about over the last year and a half as we've known each other as important, because you have to have constant content over on Pinterest.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some mistakes people make around that in a minute. So I'm interested I'm guessing that sometimes, Melissa, you're pinning from your mobile device, but how does that even benefit you, and how can that help mix in with actually getting more sales? And for you do all sorts of great content. You have ebooks that you have sold. You've got training programs that you've sold. You've got a training website that you're developing. How on earth have your pins translated into business for you that way?
Well, it's really cool to track that, because when you're looking at your traffic analytics on Google Analytics, you can get a really good idea of where traffic's coming from. And for mobile devices, it's very it's important that, of course, your website has the theme that's going to be good on a mobile device, so that people can pin directly from it. But if you're offering people pins throughout the day so they can pin on their mobile device, just repinning you, then they can either click through or go to it later. I think a lot of the traffic that we see, especially sales and traffic, is people going back to their pins and then clicking through later when they're on their desktop computer, maybe. But it's so important. One of the big mistakes is that people's websites are not, the images on their websites are not correctly titled. They're a wacky size, and so you have to make sure that you have a good web person who knows, or you are a good web person that knows how to make sure that your website is looking good on mobile, and you have to test it all the time, I think. Yeah.
So let's say in terms of your own behavior when you're on Pinterest, would you be using Pinterest on your mobile device? And if you see content, do you do anything like I do, where I share to secret boards to come back and review later? Because I think what we pin and what we share on Twitter and what we share on Google Plus or Instagram actually reflects back on our reputation and our brand. And I know, I think every piece of content I've seen from you is always high quality. Whenever I look at your content or I look at people's content that you're sharing, it's very high quality content.
I'm definitely really picky, for sure. But I love that idea. I haven't actually done that. I love that idea of doing the secret boards and then checking it out later. Also because then you can go later to pin it from the source and pin it that way. So I haven't done that. I am, for as tech savvy as I am on the computer, I'm a sort of like a novice on my phone. I don't know what it is. I don't know, I'm a phone idiot. I can barely even put in someone's phone number. So I'm not a very good example of how to use your phone. But I know that most people are using their phones for Pinterest, for sure. Just not me personally. I do occasionally, but I'm stuck on my computer all day. So I don't really use my phone for that. And I forgot to mention, we talked about the value of good content, and that is one thing that I think people forget, that Pinterest isn't just about promoting your own stuff, but it's about curating content for your customers and really being them focused instead of you focused, is because they want that content, and you want to be the resource for them that gives them the content that they want.
Well, I know you actually operate several websites now. It's not even just one or two anymore because of the additional training you're doing. And I know one of the things that you do is very regularly. In fact, you had a brilliant series last year where you were interviewing people in terms of their experience of using Pinterest. And these were people who had 1 million plus kind of followers on their own accounts. And I learned a lot through those articles that you'd written. So I know that if I look at your Pinterest content, and I should direct people that people can go and find you on Pinterest. You might want to tell them what your Pinterest board is as we're going through it now. You might want to reference that.
Oh, and my URL is pinterest.com/Melissa_Taylor2. And then we can put in the notes my specific Pinterest board.
So I know that both Melissa and I have got Pinterest boards specifically with tips about Pinterest. And much as we both write on the topic, and Melissa writes far more specifically on Pinterest than I do, most of my content is about broader visual content marketing. But even then, we can't keep up with all of the news and everything else. So we will be curating not only our own content, but other people's content. So one of the things that we should talk about are some mistakes to avoid, and I'm going to start off with a few things that I see that small businesses are doing, and perhaps you can add in and give some tips to that. Right. So one of the things I see very often is something you just mentioned there that people may not have picked up on, as you were saying about going back to the original source and making sure you're pinning from that. I'll often see people, and I think perhaps some of this happens from a personal perspective, where people might take a photograph, and you could take a photograph or share onto Pinterest. But that's why I like using it on the web, because I can make sure that if I'm sharing my own content, then I can do so by making sure that it links back not to my site or whatever site I'm linking back from, but the specific article. So I think that's one thing I often see. I come across images all the time where there's no link to an original source. The second thing I see is people using images that they don't have the rights to. And I mentioned images, but equally that could be other content we're sharing. We'll talk about that in a moment. But very often they're using images which they haven't got copyright to. And the third thing I see a lot of is my feed is deluged with content. And I can think about one business not so long back where I think about 40 to 50 pieces of content came in all of a flood. It was obviously Monday morning, Pinterest time, let's get on there. And actually it made me almost want to unfollow them, because it's really challenging as a business to get lots of followers. It's not very usual for people to have as many followers as Melissa has. It's really hard to do that because people follow specific boards based on their interest, not necessarily I want to follow the whole account. So much as I love Melissa, there might be some content that I don't want to follow. And much as she might like me, then she might not want to follow some of my content because it's not at all of her related to her personal interest.
Yeah.
So again, I actually see that people are deluging it. So there's some of the things that I see that it's going on. But I should stop there for a moment to say Pinterest can be used not just for images. You can post your videos. So in fact, when this event is over, we can post this as a YouTube video over to Pinterest. We could share GIFs. I very often share slide shares. Most of my content is actually for education reasons over on Pinterest, and I share great SlideShare presentations that people have written, and I use it to refer people back to in my training. So we don't have to just share images and infographics. But Melissa, there's some of the things I see. Maybe you see some different things, mistakes that small businesses are making.
I think people, when you're a product-based business, I see a common mistake is to just show shots of the product. For example, a wedding ring. Instead of showing the lifestyle shot of the hands with the ring on it and the smiling face. So, because the product shots are boring, and Pinterest isn't about boring. Pinterest is about exciting, beautiful, enticing lifestyle. So that's one thing that I see, really failing for many companies. Also, I think again, not thinking about their customers' interests. So even if you're selling wedding rings, you have to think that your ideal customer is wanting to know about decor and design and all those things. So you want to make sure that you're covering all those things when you're curating content. Another thing that I see often is that when people are putting text over their images or on their images, they're using fonts that are impossible to read, that are cluttery, or just you can't read them without squinting. So I think a lot of people don't realize that the serif fonts are the ones that look best on the internet, and all those fancy decorative fonts usually are hard to read. That's a big problem I see, especially with new Pinterest users. I also think that not cross-promoting is a big problem for some users, because now that there's like 70 million people on Pinterest, it's harder to get noticed. So you have to share what you're doing on Pinterest in your email newsletters, on your Facebook page, on your Google Plus page. Like you mentioned, you share the pin link for your content on Google Plus. So I think people really can't. You can't just expect people to find you anymore, because it's a crowded field.
Yeah, there's some really great tips. One of the things I want to mention, though, is that as I've got to know you, you've been writing really good content around how to create more engaging images, because I think one of the challenges is not just about time, it's about budget. And not everybody's got the budget to be able to go out and spend a lot of money on product photography. And I think one of the things that's actually a help these days, and something I did, was we could use our smartphone devices, or perhaps our tablet that we actually have got good cameras on, and perhaps go on a course to actually learn about photography. And I went on a food photography course during last year, actually inspired because of knowing you and knowing I needed to improve my images. And something that I'd been working on last year was food blogging. And that's a real art in itself.
Yeah.
And, actually, the Serious Food Bloggers, there's a lot of work that goes into creating that content. So I actually went off on that. But one of the things I've loved is the fact that you have a program, and perhaps we should just talk about that for a minute, in terms of you've got a program that's about to launch in June. And I know that it'll be available if people aren't able to get it later. There'll probably be another opportunity to join you later in the year, because you've run this a couple of times. But this is called the Eye-Catching Pins Training. Perhaps you can tell people about that, Melissa.
Well, it's just like you said. We usually can't afford graphic artists to do all our images, so we need to be able to train ourselves to play a graphic artist on TV, right? And not that you're going to be an expert, but you'll be an intermediate user. So I have eye-catching pins to share design elements that will help small businesses and entrepreneurs like ourselves improve our editing, improve our design elements, so that our pins are going to get more traffic and more sales. I even talk about how to pick the best photos. So I think it's one of those really important things. It doesn't cost very much. It's on my website, Pinterest-savvy.net, under Pinterest classes. It's one of those things that's well worth the investment for under $50. Right now it's on sale. You can get, right now it's on sale for $24.97. You can get all you need to know to improve your pins instead of spending, you know, $150 an hour on a graphic designer. You can learn to be your own graphic designer, and it really makes a huge difference in your website traffic.
I know that one of the challenges that I've had, I mean, even as we were preparing for today, is because I try to optimize my content, because I talk about visual content, and I try to optimize my content with a different size image for Facebook to Twitter to whatever else. And I have to say that I try my best to get an image that's optimal for Pinterest, but you know, between you and I, you won't tell anybody else, will you? But between you and I, sometimes, a couple of times, if it's not key content that I'm sharing, and I'm doing it, curating it really for students on my courses, very often I won't put a truly optimized pin, but I know some of my images are wider or square, where in fact longer images work much better on Pinterest. And you saw that photograph there from Pinterest, from Melissa's own Pinterest training. It was a terrific image. And take a look at the Pinterest Savvy website, because you'll see there's every single post that she posts there has got a great image, and you can learn a lot by watching what Melissa's doing.
I love that steal like an artist concept, because I love learning from other people too. So we can all take a look at other things that we like and think, how can we adapt this for our own content, you know?
Yeah, there's things that you've done over the last year that I share in my own Pinterest training. I know that one of the things is, I won't give it all away now, people can read the book, but there's some things that you've done, very smart things, to get more traffic back to content that's already on your site, but actually by adapting your images there. I think it's very, very smart. And the other thing I found is I get repins of content, you know, that people are coming across months, if not a year plus later.
The half-life of a pin is, I mean, it's long. I don't know if you can say, I've read that it's 10 days. I think it's years. I really do.
Well, I certainly am getting repins of content that I've shared over a year ago, and I've done nothing to promote it. Nothing.
Isn't that great?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so little salespeople working for me all the time, all those thousands of pins I've shared.
Right.
Let's talk about search engine optimization a little bit, but specifically Pinterest optimization for search, because within Pinterest many people don't realize that you can search, and you can search other people's content, and you can search your own content, and in fact it's different again on mobile with some new features that they've launched. But one thing I know that you teach people all the time is about how they write the descriptions for their pins. And you could almost say that's another mistake that people are making. And I see pins all the time saying, let's say it was a recipe, back to my recipe content that I have. People might just write delicious recipe, or yum yum. Now, as a business, that is of no use at all. Perhaps you can tell people what makes for a good description.
Well, and I've done a lot of tests on this, as you know. I've posted it on the blog. You need to have words that people are going to use in their searches. These are called keywords, and those will get found in Google searches and on Pinterest. But more than that, instead of just saying peach cobbler, you can add the yum yum, but you have to have both. You have to have your opinion, because it tells the people why you're pinning it. Like, I can't wait to make this. This looks delicious, or I've already made it. It's going to be great. And then what it is, the peach cobbler for summer barbecues or something like that, so that it will get repinned more. If you do a comparison of just a boring title like peach cobbler versus the title with your opinion, when you add your opinion, it'll get repinned a lot more. And then you think about it, when it's repinned on other people's blogs, or excuse me, on their boards, they're going to assume that that person has that same opinion. So it's like everyone's saying yum yum, everyone's saying this looks great, even though you said it first, it really is giving you all these extra endorsements. And remember that all your boards you want to have descriptions for. And I think, if I remember correctly, you won't get found in searches unless, is it if you have to have a business account? Do you remember?
I actually have seen other boards coming up, not business accounts actually, in search results, but I don't know why that is. And also I see those boards sometimes dropping out of search. And for example, last summer I saw one that was ranking really high for a certain kind of popsicle. So of course that was summer related. But when I went and looked for it later on in the year, and that wasn't from a business board or business account, it actually wasn't there. So I don't think anybody's really fathomed that out. But I agree. Put your keywords into your descriptions, and of course, put your keywords into your descriptions when you're uploading your images, as Melissa was saying before, in terms of be very well aware of those.
Yeah.
Melissa, one of the things that I know that I see very few people doing is actually participating and collaborating with others. And I know that's something that you do very successfully. In fact, you've got a great competition at the minute that's going on one of your sites, on Imagination Soup, where you're collaborating with other people. And people should go and have a look at that. Take a look at the posts from beginning of June, if you're coming back to this after the events of June 2014, and the competition that Melissa's running. But she's actually collaborating with other people. But another thing that you do is you collaborate with people specifically on Pinterest. So that's a Pinterest competition following the guidelines and rules that are required of Pinterest. So do check those out. But I think you do a great job in participating in collaborating and starting off boards, or in fact joining others. So we can go and find other boards, and there's tools we can use to find other boards. But I'd really be interested in terms of what you think is good practice if you were to start off a board where it's not just you that's pinning. So now that board's reputation and content and potential traffic is going to be influenced by other people that you bring in around you. And I know this is something that you've given a lot of education and training about, and you thought about it as well, and you've researched it around what makes good, firstly, objectives for using a collaborative board. Why on earth would you want to participate with other people? And then what would be some kind of guidelines or guide rails for it? Because I also see that people do abuse it, and people will get spam content and so on. So perhaps you can share with us some of your thoughts on that, and let's start with the benefits.
Well, if you are joining a collaborative board, especially if your business is relatively new on Pinterest, so you're looking for increasing your followers, you want to look for a collaborative board that you can contribute to that has a large enough following. So it's a benefit to you. If you join a collaborative board with 800 followers, there's really no benefit. But if you join a collaborative board with 50,000 followers, you're going to see a huge increase in your repins and your website traffic, as well as your followers. The one thing that I see very often is that people ask to join collaborative boards like they deserve it. So instead of offering how they're going to help the person who owns the board, they will say, I want to join your collaborative board, or please add me to your board. And I think, well, now why? Why would I do that? I don't even know you. How are you going to contribute? I got the kindest email last week from someone who explained what their content was, how they were going to contribute and make my board better, and I just loved it because I thought this person really gets that it's about the end user. It's not about her increasing her, I mean it is. She'll get a lot of benefit out of it, but she really asked in a nice way. And when I start collaborative boards, I think about who can contribute that will have good content, but also who I can trust. So I think you have to vet people. You can't just add anyone to your collaborative board because it's a hassle to have to look through all the pins to see, oh, do I have to delete anyone? Is someone spamming my, because it goes to all of the people who are following that board. So I usually have a rule of how many times people can pin per day or per week. And then, like I said, I vet people. So I don't just add anybody because it's too much work. We don't have the time to have, to really watch that all the time and worry about if people are respecting your guidelines.
So as we wrap up our time together today, and I could go on for hours talking to you, Melissa, but you mentioned before about the importance of analytics. Tell us about some of the things that you watch out for in terms of when you're looking at what success looks like, and particularly think about the people here who are small businesses and what they should be looking out for, not just their traffic.
Yeah, I think Pinterest is like the best market research, because you can see what's popular, what's really hitting with your audience, and you can see what traffic you're getting. And again, it's like you can tell, okay, this is where my customers want to spend money on. This is what my customers find interesting. Here's what I might want to. You can use that information to drive what you continue to work on. I know Green Kid Crafts, they decide the next month's craft based on what's popular that they've pinned. So they can say, well, this is going to be a success, or this is a no-go. Because of Pinterest, you can tell if it's popular or not even without looking at your analytics, if it gets 2 repins or 2,000. So it's really helpful, because you get so much information about what your customers are looking for and what is going to be popular with them, and how you can plan for the future.
So thank you so much, Melissa, for kind of giving us some really practical advice today. I think that's really great advice in terms of using it for that inspiration and planning. And I should also just kind of give a final tip that I know that you have educated people around through the work that I've seen you write, and through our collaborations together, is that make sure that you've got that plan together. And Melissa was talking about her plan beforehand. You might just want to add to this, Melissa, because Pinterest is very different around when people are curating and saving content there, because they are saving things in advance. So the idea of actually posting something about something that's happening today is not really what people are looking at Pinterest for. They're using it for planning. Yeah. And I know one of the things that you've looked at and you constantly advise people around is, for the next quarter, you need to be thinking about these things. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily the things that are right on top of us. So, for example, you work in the world of education. I'm sure you've already got your back-to-school content ready, have you?
No, but I will. But yeah, so I have that idea that I'm going to start posting that. That goes live in August, right? And for us in the States, and I know if you're overseas, especially those of you who are in Australia or New Zealand or Asia, it's a little different schedule. But for most of my readers go back to school in August. So I think it's so important that you keep up with those seasonal trends. I have a client that's a coupon blog, and they can't post coupons because, those are fast, those are quick. And we talked about the half-life of a pin is a long time. So the content on Pinterest has to be something that sustains and is interesting for a month or a year, not just one day coupon thing.
Yeah, well, it just makes me think about my children going to be coming onto school holidays soon, and actually what I saw trending in August last year was actually Halloween on Pinterest, and we hadn't even got our kids back to school. Yeah. So you've got to be aware of your market, and also just think in advance. It's not about really real time. Real time is Twitter, it's Instagram, it's Facebook. Pinterest is about people's interests, and I hope we've kept you interested today in terms of the tips that we've been sharing. Melissa, perhaps you can tell people the best ways for them to get in contact with you. I'll wrap up and remind people about how to get the book, but you've got a number of platforms, and I want you to talk about your new endeavor, which is your social media training programs.
Yeah, I found in hiring for clients that it's really hard to adapt, to really understand the marketing mindset for all the platforms, especially if you're a new entrepreneur or small business. So I just started a website, iheartsocialmedia.com, and my first class will be on Pinterest marketing specifically, and it's geared for advanced users. We're talking some really specific strategies for gaining followers, for marketing products, that kind of thing. And then I'll be rolling out the classes on Google+, Twitter, and Facebook. So that's iHeartSocialMedia.com. And if all goes well, I'll be offering certifications too. So that's in the works. And you can also find me, of course, at Pinterest-savvy.net, and all my social media links are there.
And don't forget, in fact, your other site, which is Imagination Soup. So some of the people here today might be interested in your education content, which is absolutely terrific. You might want to give details of that site.
That's imaginationsoup.net.
Fantastic. So I hope everybody, you've all enjoyed being with us here today. We'd love to have your feedback, so please make sure that you let us know, because we'd really appreciate understanding. Oh, I've gone all funny. Let's get back off that. I don't normally make such a mess up of that screen sharing. Let me just try that again. Yes, so remember that you can get in contact with Melissa and I in terms of leaving your feedback or questions. I know Melissa would particularly like to know what you have to say about what she shared with you today. Remember to get Melissa's second edition of Pinterest Savvy, and if you're catching us here today live or just after the event, that's on the 2nd of June 2014, you'll be lucky enough to be able to download a free copy from Amazon, and if not, then you'll be able to find it afterwards. In terms of, it's not very expensive for you to be able to purchase. So that's the first thing, is in terms of one call to action. My second recommendation is if, like me, you've been trying to get your visual content really in a much better shape, then really I want to encourage you to have a look at the program that Melissa's doing, which is all about doing the program in terms of eye-catching pins, and that content will really work in terms of for other social media networks as well. And then the final thing is, if you are not interested in doing either of those things, I really want to encourage you to think about what could you adopt, adapt, or apply from the ideas that we've shared today. Is there one thing? I mean, you've invested 40 minutes or so of your time. I like to make sure that if I go onto a program, I take something away. Perhaps we've reinforced something for you, but ideally we've actually given you something to review and reconsider. And I know I've got some things to rethink in terms of my visual content. I always do when I speak to people on the show here, on the Visual Content Marketing Show. And then just finally, in terms of make sure that you keep in touch with us, you can come over to visualcontentmarketingshow.com and you can leave your details there to be able to get into a future programs, and we'll let you know. Of course, you can follow me in lots of places on social media, on Google+, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I think there's many other places besides, and of course on Pinterest, as we talked about today. Mostly, though, if you want to keep in touch with the shows, that you'll find me posting about them over on Twitter, and always on LinkedIn I'll share about my shows that I'm doing for the Visual Content Marketing Show, and of course here on Google+. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you've benefited from Melissa's wisdom. I know I have. Melissa, thanks again for being with us here today, and I look forward to connecting with you on Pinterest or in real life very soon again. And of course, all of you who've been watching, please let us know what you've thought about us. About the program? Have you enjoyed it? Are there things that you'd like us to go into further depth? I might be able to persuade Melissa to come back and do another show with me later on this year. Thanks again. Thanks again, Melissa.
Thank you, Krishna.